You see the BBC thing? The BBC thing is crazy. The head of BBC had to resign because they took a film of Trump from January 6th, the speech that he gave, and they edited it so something that he said 52 minutes later, they put right after one he said something to make it look like he was trying to get people to go attack people and fight at the Capitol.
Wow.
And it's not
They
what
do
he
that
said.
to you all the time.
But this one's
That's
one's
crazy.
nuts. This not only is this one nuts, but this one is for a literal president of the greatest country the world's ever known. He's the president, and you're lying about what he said publicly, which is on the internet, which anybody can see. Like, it is the clearest indication of how that woke shit was rotting people's brains. And still, but just less. You know what I mean? It was on the march then, and they all felt like they had to go along with it. And so, and by any means necessary, we must make sure that, so they decided to paint a different version of what he said. And they're fucked now. They're fucked.
BBC?
60 Minutes did it with the Kamala Harris interview, but they did it the other way. They made it look like she had a good answer. Which is it's so crazy. Like, you guys are supposed to be the news.
Right.
You're not supposed to be the propaganda arm of whatever party you support.
Do you guys remember that interview with Kamala Harris where they asked her softball questions and then they spliced out the things that she didn't answer well? And BBC is doing the same thing. And Trump now is suing them for $1 million. Okay? It's like you can't trust mainstream media anymore. But let me know what you think. I'm going to continue with this. This is Renee from Kingdom Politico. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share.
Nuts.
Boy. So we got to talk about the BBC taking a pounding from President Trump as he is threatening a massive $1 billion lawsuit due to the fact that they deceptively edited a clip of President Trump giving a speech on January 6th where they made it seem like President Trump made a direct call to violence. I want to go ahead and show you guys the BBC edit versus the original clip, and you guys can be the judge for yourself.
We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
Yeah, so I just want to play it again because I want to show you guys why I believe that this was definitely done on purpose. This was done with malice.
We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to...
Yeah, so the reason why I believe that this was definitely done on purpose is because of the fact that they didn't put any type of transition in between that, right? Usually, like when I edit videos, okay, and I am editing people talking, okay, you can't play the whole thing, right? You want to play the parts that people need to hear, okay, in order to get the context of the conversation. But a lot of you guys sometimes complain and you say, well, you're playing clips of other people too long. Well, the reason why I do that is because I don't want to deceptively edit any clips of what anybody's saying to make them seem like they're saying things that they're not saying. I don't want to do that. I actually go out of my way to make sure I don't do that. So when you're splitting a clip, usually to make it clear to the viewer that this is a different part of the conversation, that it's not a continuous clip, you insert a transition. Like, for example, watch this. Boom. You see that transition? Yeah. So if I insert a transition like that, that means that, hey, this is a different part of the conversation, or it's a different sentence, or there were some things that were cut out in between for the sole purpose of shortening the clip so that people can get the gist of the conversation, the context of the conversation. But just understand that that wasn't a continuous sentence. Like, it was cut out. Some things were cut out in between, that is not the same part of the conversation, right? That is typically what you would do, okay? Because again, you can't show everything. Everybody knows that. So in a speech like the speech that President Trump gave on January 6th, yeah, I mean, as a news outlet, you might want to make sure that you're not editing a clip in a way that anybody can interpret the president saying something or doing something that he actually didn't do or he didn't say. But the BBC, somebody purposely edit this clip and say, you know what, I'm going to take this part of President Trump telling people to go to the Capitol, and then I'm going to take the part where he says fight, 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 and I'm going to clip it together with no transition, right? No clear transition to show that, hey, these are two different parts of the speech, right? No transition to make it seem like a continuous thing.
And here's the thing. When they did that, it made it look like he actually attempted to incite an insurrection. The January 6th committee was put together, and not only were the people that, and let's be honest, some of them did go into the Capitol, but from what I'm hearing and what investigators are finding, that there were a lot of instigators in the at the Capitol. There were two entrances. One side where there were peaceful people coming in, and you had the Capitol Police escorting them in and showing them different parts of the Capitol, and the other side where they were breaking windows. So there are reports of Antifa being there, allegedly federal operatives and that sort of thing. So with the BBC, a British organization, splicing a tape like this shows you that there was a nefarious thing going on. You meant to do this. There's no way an organization, a news outlet media as large as BBC would hire someone that didn't know what they're doing. So this was being done intentionally. And Trump is suing for $1 million. Now, this January 6th committee that was formed wasn't only interrogating and arrested hundreds of people, okay, some innocent, and put them away for at least 3 years. Some of them are still in jail. You have grandmothers that are in jail that went in on the other side peacefully. But they weren't just trying to do that, but they were trying to lock Donald Trump up as well. Okay, so if I were president of the United States, I would look at this as an insurrection from a foreign government, interference from a foreign government. And no, I wouldn't just be suing BBC. I would sue the conglomerate or whoever was over it that allowed something like this to happen. And here's the thing. You can't be in London or the UK or go on social media and say something that they claim is offensive or not true without them locking you up. They're locking you up for true speech, calling it misinformation. Okay, so the BBC knew exactly what they were doing. So let me know what you think in the comments. But this is a Black conservative perspective. I'm going to put this gentleman's video in the chat so that you can see it in the comments. Okay, make sure you like, subscribe, and share. I'm going to continue with the information.
And that's, in my opinion, how I know it was done with malice, because I edit videos all day, right? I edit my own videos, and I know how this goes, right? I know how the thought process goes and what I'm thinking about when I'm editing clips and editing conversations. And yeah, this definitely was done on purpose, 100%. So this footage aired before the election in some type of program or special that they had, and now they are apologizing to the president due to the fact that President Trump has threatened legal action against the BBC, including suing them for over $1 billion.
BBC is apologizing to President Trump for a misleading edit of his January 6th speech in a documentary. But the dispute over that edit may now move toward a legal battle. The president has threatened a $1 billion lawsuit, saying that the edit caused serious damage unless the film is fully retracted and that he is compensated. The BBC says the documentary is off the air and it will not pay any compensation. The fallout has already shaken the network, with 2 executives stepping down. That happened earlier this week. Joining us now, Tyler O'Neill, senior editor at the Daily Signal. Thank you so much for joining us. How big of a deal is this for the BBC to publicly apologize to a U.S. president?
Yeah, I think this sets a very strong precedent. I mean, what we see, President Trump has demanded more than this, but at the same time, he has gotten a historic apology from the BBC for splicing these two things together. Now, the BBC is claiming that it was not the BBC themselves who made the decision to splice together the quotes that gave the impression of President Trump encouraging his supporters to be violent and to attack the Capitol. But, you know, they're still taking some responsibility. They're still apologizing. We still had these resignations. It remains to be seen if President Trump is going to consider this apology enough. As you said, he's demanded more than an apology. He has also been successful in suing other media companies, mostly in the United States, for defamation when they have made claims that have twisted his words and presented him in very negative lights.
What are you hearing, Tyler? Might there be more resignations before this is all said and done?
I'm not certain we would expect more resignations, but I do think what we're going to hear, we're next hearing probably from the president himself, if he is going to accept this apology or if he is going to consider legal action. When it comes to legal action, he's going to face a few hurdles. I believe the statute of limitations for filing a defamation lawsuit in UK law has just passed on this particular issue, but he might be able to sue in U.S. courts.
What does this situation say about the pressure newsrooms face when covering political people?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. Newsrooms have to be fair and accurate in presenting what political figures like President Trump actually say. And so in this instance, you had a very clear situation where quotes were spliced out of context. If you listen to Trump's entire speech, he said that it's perfect. I'm not certain about that. But I do know that he said repeatedly that he wanted his supporters to be peaceful in their protest. And he did not call for them to fight like hell in attacking the Capitol in the way that his words were spliced to suggest in this video recording.
And due to that splicing, how big of a fracture does this cause in the trust for the BBC?
I think it's going to be a very negative scandal for the BBC. We've seen the BBC under fire for the way that they presented Brexit and suggested that it was, a Russian, essentially a Russian influence campaign in the past. And we've seen many conservative MPs taking stands against the BBC in the past. I think this is going to lead to more opposition to the BBC. And I also think, one of the interesting things to come out of this is seeing that U.S. taxpayer dollars actually ended up funding the BBC to some extent indirectly through USAID.
Okay, you heard that, right? Where our taxpayers have been funding news outlets like this to give us wrong information, to cause us to vote in a way maybe that we wouldn't have voted if we didn't have this incorrect information. So, and this is why, honestly, I don't listen to a lot of mainstream news any longer. I can't, because I can't trust them. I don't think that the news has been honest for at least 30 years. There's no integrity in broadcasting. At least be fair when you're putting up candidates, whether they're mayoral candidates, presidential candidates, whoever it is that you bring up there. Be fair when you're reporting on them. And I find a lot of these news organizations, ABC, CBS, NBC, I don't think is as bad as the rest of them. But I find these left-wing news organizations to be biased in the way that they report candidates. But let me know what you think in the comments. All right, but we'll continue.
I think that is something that conservatives in the United States are going to have serious concerns about, given this splicing scandal.
Interesting. Tyler O'Neill, thank you so much.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Again, I'm not buying the apology or the explanation from the BBC because I know how this goes. And there's somebody that, from an editorial perspective, had the responsibility of reviewing the documentary, the program, to make sure that stuff like this didn't happen, right? That, hey, we're not clipping the speech out of context, trying to make the president say something that he really didn't say. Somebody had the responsibility of doing that, and somebody had to sign off on it before it was aired. Now, you do have executives who have resigned from their positions due to this. However, yeah, I think a lawsuit is appropriate, for sure, 100%. These media outlets are getting away with propaganda and trying to deceptively edit clips to push a narrative on behalf of a political party or a political agenda. Okay, we see this happen in the United States all the time. Okay, right now, I personally think that the president should be looking at suing a lot of individuals on MSDNC, BS now, when it comes to the Epstein stuff, right? A lot of people need to be sued for that because, I mean, they're not even hiding anymore. They're just straight up calling the president a pedophile, right? You had George Slopopotamus at ABC essentially called the president a rapist. ABC was punished for that. Yeah, I mean, they're just saying these things. They're making these claims.
Did he say George Slopopopoulos? And here's the thing. These aren't just like name calling that you do as children, where you're in the yard and you're fighting one another and you have a disagreement and you say, oh, well, you're stupid. Well, your mommy's stupid. That's not what we're dealing with here. There have been at least 3 attempts, maybe more, on President Trump's life. And if you don't think this rhetoric on these news stations has caused this, then you're out of your mind. Okay? But let me know what you think. I'm going to continue with this thought.
With no evidence, right? These false claims. And then, you know, they don't think that they should be punished for it, right? They want to boo-hoo, whine, and cry because they're not allowed to just openly call the president a rapist and a pedophile, right? And again, in this story right here with the BBC, yeah, they're editing the clip to try to make it seem like the president called for a violent attack on the Capitol when that's clearly not what he did in the speech. But it just conveniently fits the narrative from the left about President Trump's speech. So President Trump apparently is rejecting the apology from the BBC, and he is going to move forward with punishing them with a lawsuit. So let's get into it.
To Donald Trump after one of their programs edited a speech he gave in 2024 before the last election.
A major talking point in the US, of course, has been Donald Trump's threat to sue the BBC now after that Panorama program edited up his January the 6th speech, trying to fit him up as encouraging violence that followed down there at those riots at Capitol Hill. Here's a reminder of what the BBC put to air.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Yeah, that was 100% done on purpose. And that was done with a professional level edit. Okay, you wouldn't be able to tell just with the naked eye that, hey, this was spliced up unless you heard the whole speech and you know, okay, he didn't actually say that. So, yeah, I mean, this is really bad, right? Like, this is really, really, really bad. It is super obvious that whoever edited that, whoever signed off on it, they did it with an agenda. It was 100% done with malice. This is really bad.
Now, this sort of egregious editing and misleading media coverage doesn't really surprise a lot of us. But as I put to our US contributor, Kristen Tate, Donald Trump certainly won't be taking this lying down.
Good for him. I mean, this was broadcast 1 week before the 2024 presidential election here in the United States. The BBC did this intentionally. They took out the parts of Trump's speech from January 6th, 2021, where he repeatedly said for his protesters to be peaceful. It's absolutely deceptive editing. This potentially reached tens of millions of people on all of the BBC's various platforms. And they are right to be called out by Trump. Some higher ups at the BBC have already stepped down over this controversy. And look, you know, Chris, it's okay to have an opinion. That's fine. It happens all the time on TV. What's not okay is to disguise an opinion as hard news. You know what that is? That is actually trying to interfere with an election, which is exactly what this was. And good on Trump for calling them out. I hope they pay up.
Trump was furious with the edit and threatened to sue the BBC for over $1 billion.
Are you going ahead and suing the BBC?
Well, I guess I have to. You know, why not? Because they defrauded the public, and they've admitted it, and they're top echelon.
Director General and the CEO.
This is within one of our great allies. You know, this is supposedly our great ally, BBC. The government has a chunk of that one, I guess, but that's a pretty sad event. They actually changed my January 6th speech, which was a beautiful speech, which was a very calming speech, and they made it sound radical, and they actually changed it. What they did was rather incredible. They're showing me the results later on, the results of what they did, how they butchered it up. But it was very dishonest, and the head man quit, and a lot of the other people quit.
The BBC went into meltdown and then desperately apologised to Trump.
This all started with the Panorama edit. I've just got this in. This is just breaking news, Emma, which relates to this story. We're just hearing that the BBC has apologised to Donald Trump over the editing of a speech which appeared on Panorama in 2024, adding it was an error of judgment and the programme will not be broadcast again in this form on any BBC platforms. So that's the BBC apologising directly to the President of the United States over the editing of a speech that appeared on Panorama in 2024. But Emma, by the sounds of it, there might be another apology to make.
Yeah, so that was the one that's caused such a furore over the last week or so that resulted on Sunday night in the Director General of the BBC, the big boss, Tim Davie, resigning. Also, the Chief Executive of BBC News, Deborah Turness, both of those leaving their roles. Then the BBC chair apologising for what he called an error of judgment.
Now, do you think that was an error of judgment, or do you think that was purposely done? Let me know in the comments. And what do you think Donald Trump should do? Do you think he should accept the apology from the BBC, or should he continue suit? All right. This is Renee from Kingdom Politico. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you on the next one. Have a good night.